My name is Rika Beppu. I'll be your MC for this session. I'm a corporate M&A lawyer at Squire & Pattenbach's Tokyo office. I'm also an Asia 21 Young Leaders Initiative 2007 Fellow, as well as a founding member of Asia Society Japan Center. I'm personally very excited to welcome you all today to a very important session of jointly organized by International House's Asia Pacific Young Leaders Program, which is an umbrella program for many different young leaders programs that they have been involved in, as well as Asia Society's Asia 21 Young Leaders Initiative. As opening remarks, I'm delighted to welcome Ambassador Haggerty to the podium to welcome you all. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here with you this afternoon and to extend my congratulations to the Asia Society and to the International House of Japan for coming together in a rather unique partnership to help form the Asia Society of Japan's outlet here. I think it's a terrific accomplishment, and I'm very honored to help launch it today. I'm also very honored to be here with my predecessor, Ambassador Kennedy, who always has time for me, which I very much appreciate, and whose continued service to the Alliance really means a great deal. Your presence here today underscores that, and it underscores the importance of the alliance that we have with Japan. Thank you. And to the Asia Society President, Josette Sheeran, it's very nice to meet you today. I'd like to extend my congratulations to you too here, not only for this accomplishment, but for being such a great recruiter. You have brought two people who are new friends to me, Wendy Cutler and Danny Russell, together. I've gotten to know them over the past year. They've been great help to me, and I'm also pleased to say they're great friends. So I very much appreciate what you've done to bring them together. I've not met Prime Minister Rudd yet, but I look forward to working with him, and appreciate your contributions, Prime Minister, to this great effort. Thank you. You've also got two great leaders here in James Kondo and Terry Porte. I understand that the two of you, where are you? There's Terry, and James, one of my favorites, but have had just a huge impact here locally and played a very major role in the establishment of this institution. So my congratulations to you and my thanks to you as well. This launch, I think, further underscores the incredible commitment of Asia to this region, of America to the Asian region. Your presence here will play a big and continuing role, and we appreciate that. Importantly, your outreach to young leaders, I think, will make an incredible difference as they begin to make their own constructive and positive commitments to this region. I think, James, you know very well how important I believe it is to reach out to young leaders. It's something that I want to wholeheartedly support, and it's something I think brings great optimism to their relationship moving forward. These young leaders will make a positive contribution, I'm certain, and I look forward to seeing great success from what's to come. So congratulations to all of you here. This is a wonderful asset for us to build upon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Haggerty. I'd just like to take a few minutes to introduce the Asia Society Asia 21 Young Leaders Initiative. So what's in a leadership program? You get together a wide-ranging group of people who are 40 and under, note the age limit, and the fact that there's a young in the initiative. This dream was hatched over 10 years ago. The inaugural class started in 2006, of which our Japan Center co-chair, James Kondo, is an inaugural member. Since then, the network has grown to over 900 alumni spanning 40 countries. As a fellow in 2007, I have made friends in countries and in areas that I could only dream about. This has been such a life enrichment network of people who we have all grown up together in our professional careers, in our personal lives. We've had babies, We've lost our own children for illnesses. We have seen very different situations in each country's developing, but we are all there for each other. This has meant such a great deal, and as Asia 21 alumni, this is something that has transformed our lives and enriched our lives forevermore. So with the launch of the Japan Center, we are delighted to bring together and showcase what Asia 21 means by having a panel discussion with our members, kindly moderated by Ambassador Kennedy, who is our much loved former US ambassador. And I can only say, welcome back, Ambassador, from the bottom of my heart, okaeri nasai. We missed you, and we're so delighted that you're here today. With Ambassador Kennedy's specific hope that she will be able to enhance our conversation that we would all benefit from hearing today. So without further ado, I'd like to pass on to Ambassador Kennedy to start the session, which is the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Beppu. I want to start a Asia Young at Heart Leaders Program for the rest of us. But thank you for having me. Thank you, Ambassador Haggerty, for all you're doing to strengthen the U.S.-Japan alliance. I know I've met and spoken with so many people who are working with you and are just so grateful for your dedication and commitment. And I know that you are busy, and there's nothing like keeping a congressman or a senator waiting, so if you have to leave, please do. They love it, really. But just as you live every day, there's nothing more, no alliance stronger than the U.S.-Japan, thanks to generations of our predecessors who have spent their lives learning from each other and building friendships and partnerships based on our shared democratic values and global cooperation. It's wonderful to be back in iHouse to celebrate the opening of the Asia Society Japan Center. I want to thank Josette for her leadership and for inviting me to be part of this event. I want to congratulate James and Terry for all they've done to bring the Asia Society's vision to life here in Japan and embrace Japan into the Asia Society family. And it's great to see so many good friends. This is the right time for this center to open. It's a transformative moment for Japan. Prime Minister Abe has made global and regional leadership one of his priorities. His recent meetings with Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi have showed the success that he has had, as well as the conclusion of CPTPP. The world is eager for Japan's leadership. As a generous partner committed to peace and stability, countries in the region look to Japan to take on a greater role in all aspects of their development. So it's our hope that this center can contribute to that effort. As many countries turn inward, it's more important than ever that we work across boundaries to solve our common challenges. And as leaders around the world encourage more nationalistic policies, the work of peace building, inclusion, sustainability must be increasingly carried forward by the private sector and NGOs. Fortunately, there is a generation coming of age that is up to the task. They're committed to developing the tools necessary to finding solutions, right solutions for different communities. They're committed to building more livable cities, empowering individual voices in this decision-making process, protecting the rights of those facing discrimination and who are marginalized. They represent a global generation that draws on their American experiences to craft local Asian solutions. I meet them wherever I go, and I'm inspired by their dedication and creativity and commitment. I'd like to ask 4 outstanding young Asia 21 fellows to join us now. You have their statements in your program. I'm going to say as little as possible so that you can hear from them, but I want to introduce them briefly. Please welcome Bernise Ang, principal of Zeroth Labs in Singapore, which applies systems dynamics to complex societal problems. Arnel Casanova from AECOM Technology in the Philippines, which is building stronger communities through strengthening human and capital infrastructure. Kanae, Japan Director, Human Rights Watch, who fights to secure basic human rights for those facing discrimination here, currently focusing on the LGBT community and on children facing bullying and institutionalization here in Japan. And Eugene, President of Cortico, formerly of the State Department, had a lot of questions for me. Currently working to reconnect communities using a new physical digital network supported by MIT Research Lab for Social Machines Technology. So thank you all for coming. There's going to be a lot of interrupting, and that's not maybe something that we're all used to here, but I have 2 microphones, so I don't know what's going on. But anyway, I was hoping that just to start, you could each briefly tell us a little bit about how you got, how you started your journey in public service, how you are working to advance the goals that you've stated, and was there any sort of person or experience that really started you off? Well, I don't know. Here. You guys decide.
Hello? Yeah. Ooh. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Ambassador Kennedy. It's such an honor to be here and be on stage with such esteemed colleagues and friends. Yeah, I'm very excited for our panel. I hope that it's a very lively discussion, and I hope that people can ask us questions as well if there's anything that needs clarification. My journey in public service actually started right out of college, where one of my professors, Tom Christensen, taught me China foreign policy, and he later became the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. And he brought me on as an intern when I was a sophomore in college. And I think after that, I was on a pathway towards studying computational biology, and then I switched and started to do foreign policy. So I went and joined the U.S. Department of Defense right after college as a young kind of country desk officer, and kind of never looked back after that. I just wanted to dedicate my work to public service. I come from a family of Korean immigrants, and we feel like I felt that I had a tremendous opportunity as a Korean immigrant family in the United States. And I knew that that was actually not a widespread case, so I wanted to figure out how to make systems in a way that was more just, equitable, and other American, kind of hyphenated American, other Asian Americans can have similar opportunities.
So hello everyone, my name is Kanae Doi, Japan Director for Human Rights Watch. So I established Human Rights Watch Tokyo office around 10 years ago, and then in fact I have to thank many of you who had supported its establishment from the beginning, including Porte-san. I mean, it's nice to see you, ohisashiburi desu. And then James Kondo and everyone else. And then I think, before studying Human Rights Watch, I was a lawyer, and then I think why I started to be human rights lawyer as opposed to business lawyers. I mean, there are lots of successful business lawyers here in this room as well, and then I really respect their work, and then their work looks really interesting. However, the why I choose to be a human rights lawyer probably is related to my experience when I was in college. I went to Eritrea, one of the very small African nation, which got independence from Ethiopia very recently. I was volunteering there for 1 year, and then that was a really eye-opening experience for me. And also, when I became a lawyer, one of the first cases I took was was a case related to asylum seeker in Japan, and then a man from Afghanistan who is almost my age was detained in one of Japan's immigration center, and then he was really crying to me and asked after I didn't commit any crime, and then I just came to Japan to get help, and then I am ending up in this immigration center, and then this I am free person, I'm being a lawyer, and then this amount of same age in detention center really got me to stand up for the rights of everyone, including human rights, including asylum seekers. And then lastly, when I am doing human rights work, I'm really inspired by a lot of human rights activists. And then these days, one of my focus area is LGBT rights. And then here I have a fellow activist, Fumino, somewhere around here. He's a transgender Fumino-san. Oh yes, over there. Fumino-san. He's a transgender man, and then he is really one of my source of inspiration and motivation to work on this issue, because they are fighting not only for other people's rights. Sometimes getting criticized, being harassed, and then, but they are really forward-looking and then committed to change the society for better. So they are really the source for me to continue my service in the public area.
Oh, my journey started when I was still very young. I came from a very poor family. I was actually the first college graduate in my family. My mother was a seamstress, my father was unemployed. We're a landless family working at a farm. And we always had struggle with food and education. In my community, no one had gone to college. I was the first, actually. And and then you experience discrimination and prejudice also when you're poor. You tend to believe that you have to fight for everything just to eat. And then we were also homeless, so we had to move from place to place as a family that would provide a shelter. So now that I'm capable and I've equipped myself with necessary talent, I think it's important to pay it forward, provide opportunity. Particularly, I think what's important is that even when you're poor, you should not lose your human dignity, because that's the greatest evil that poverty could impose on a human being, is that when you have to beg for food, you had to from the morning when you wake up, all you think of is where I'm going to get food, right? So and for not only for myself but for my family also, my siblings. So I had by the grace of the God, I was able to finish college, working myself in college, and then got scholarship, went to Harvard, and then became a lawyer. Then I became an urban planner and built cities, we started building infrastructure that would also create an inclusive city. Because the way I look at the cities now, there are, particularly in Manila, there are gated subdivisions. So the rich live in their own secluded, comfortable communities, while millions of people live in the slums and squalor. I think that should not be the case. I think cities and countries and people must create a community together, and that everyone, when they work hard, they work through their merits, not because of their privilege and entitlement, and that everyone, regardless of color or gender, they'll be able to be provided opportunity. So in whatever way I can, when you're poor, you don't have choices. So what I did in my life is, wherever I was, I just make the best of it. Or so probably you'll see in my profile, I've done a lot of things, but simply because I just did what I need to do wherever I was. Thank you.
I just wanted to echo a big thank you to Ambassador Kennedy for not only making the time, but also using your influence to make space for diverse voices to promote public service, which we can all use more of in today's world. So the truthful answer is I got conned into activism when I was studying for my undergrad in Sydney. So I was invited to a beer and pizza party that turned out to be an organizing meeting for the student elections the next year. So I unwittingly got involved. But the beer was worth it. And that started my journey into grassroots organizing and learning the methods and the techniques and the communications and all of these really important things that need to come together for groups of people that don't normally have voice to then make that voice audible. So there was a campaign that I worked on, and I shared this story this morning with some of you. In New South Wales State, unlike the other states in Australia, international students had to pay double of what domestic students paid for their bus fare, their ferry rides and train rides. And it doesn't seem like much, it's like an extra $1 or $2. But it was a matter of principle, right? And we felt that this was not cool, and that international students should be treated the same way as everyone else. And so we did something that was politically and legally unusual at the time, which was to put together a legal case and file it with the Anti-Discrimination Tribunal of New South Wales. And it took years. So I had graduated, thinking this is hopeless. Why did I even bother putting all those late nights of research? So we kind of went about it in a nerdy way. We did a lot of research and put together all these statistics about international student contribution to education. And then the ruling came through that the New South Wales state government was being discriminatory to international students. And that was huge. And I come from Singapore. We're not used to challenging authority. So I was really scared. And there was actually a clause that all international students had to abide by, which is if you get involved in political activities, you could get sent back to your home country. So I kind of did this eyes wide open, with my knees shaking the whole time, but tried to do what I could do. And kind of that led me down the path of social justice work, which is now expressed in very strange systems, bubble and arrows maps. I won't get into too much detail, but that was the turning point that opened my eyes and kind of was my political awakening that I wouldn't have had if I had just stayed in Singapore and not left my bubble.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I think one of the important hopes for this center is that it will connect young leaders in different countries. And you just mentioned how going abroad, studying abroad really changed your life. I think that's something that everyone who goes and spends time in another country or who has a family background maybe that's different from the country where they're living really experiences, and I think is a huge advantage, but many people are increasingly afraid to go and study abroad, to take the leap. And I know it's something that the Japanese government is also promoting. So are there ways that you have found to work with other people in other countries, other advice that you could give people in the audience who are interested in that? What is the role of technology in facilitating that, or does it make it harder?
Actually, I think Eugene will have a lot of good things to say about this. In terms of organizing across countries, I found that, so I'm going to say a very typical thing, which is social media has actually been really, really helpful in my work. So one of my early issues, other than the public transport thing, was climate change. And we worked, so when I say we, it was a ragtag bunch of young people from different countries all over the world, some of whom managed to get to New York to organize for the UNFCCC climate negotiations. And this was at a time where young people weren't actually yet recognized as an official constituent group. And so one of the things we did was, okay, we are physically here, and then there's a whole bunch of other people who are not. So can we organize using Google Docs and Facebook groups to allow for people who want to participate to be able to do so with us as the physical avatars in situ to create a process that would enable us to cobble together policy positions that would be delivered to these heads of states and ambassadors on what mattered to young people, at least at the time. This was about 10, 12 years ago. And it really made a difference that we could edit. So this sounds really mundane, but it made a big difference that we could edit documents in real time with Google Docs, because the next 3 minutes was when our statement was up, the flag was already up, and the chair of the commission was going to call on us any minute now, and get our statement out there. So I can't downplay the significance of technology, but I also don't want to say use technology, because that's not very useful. So what I will say is that it is a tool, right? And something that was helpful for us, so I don't want to give advice, but what was helpful for us was when we thought through, what do we want to use this for? How do we want to organize? Because you can equally use technology to discriminate or to marginalize if not used carefully. So, so the way that we created processes to maximize different voices to be able to participate that otherwise couldn't was one of our guiding principles, and that helped us a lot.
Do you want to share any experience? I know you've worked in Afghanistan and other countries as well as the Philippines. Are there challenges to doing that? Are there ways, do you seek points of view from other countries? Could you work here in Japan? What advice would you have for people who want to sort of expand their horizons?
I think traveling around the world and talking and working with leaders, and so I've met the poorest person and I've met the richest person in the world. When I graduated in Harvard, Bill Gates was
like better, yeah.
Bill Gates was our commencement speaker. I went to Kennedy School, but I realized there's a lot of things are in common. People want better quality of life. People want to be given opportunities to experience their own development. So when I went to Afghanistan and I had a 1-hour meeting with President Kanae, and I can feel his own frustration and his own sense of urgency and his sense of hope at the same time. So all of those things are coming together, and I pity him because it's like the burden of leadership, which somehow when I shared to him our own experience when we had deposed Marcos in 1986. So the thing is, when tyranny is deposed, there's a power vacuum. And the tyranny actually destroyed all institutions, particularly dictatorship that had persisted for so many years. Democratic institutions that had taken decades to establish could be wiped out in a very short period of time, could be a year, 2 years. Much more when a dictatorship had persisted more than a decade. But then again, you can't give into despair. And your most immediate need is to be able to believe in your own capability as a leader, even if you are so afraid. And I can sense that fear. But at the same time, because I think for those who have led organizations and have faced challenges, we are all afraid when we're alone. When I was a CEO, I was afraid myself with certain decisions that I had to make. But you had to make that decision. But at the same time, just trusting your instinct that this is the right thing to do. And then just praying that the Lord God will rectify it if you make a mistake, right? So, but the thing is, knowing also with such humility that you can't do it on your own. Leadership entails understanding that the work is bigger than yourself and being able to prepare a successor. And I think this is one of the greatest mistakes of many leaders. When they are successful, they tend to be self-absorbed, not realizing that succession is critically important. And that happened to us when, after the Ramos presidency, we had a Estrada presidency, which we had to depose in 2 years' time because of corruption Then we had the Arroyo presidency, which was, again, problematic in corruption. Then we had the Aquino presidency, which somehow gave us, again, hope. But then again, we have another presidency, which, of course, everyone knows here what it's all about. But I think it's not only happening in the Philippines, it's happening in so many countries now. But I think, so there's the understanding that we can't do it alone. And the work is bigger than us. And therefore, we must be able to reach out, not only to our own tribe or to our own nation, but also beyond our own borders. And that's what struck me, because President Ghani, being a president himself, reached out to me, knowing my skill and my experience, and I was quite, I feel overwhelmed as well that, this man is trying to pick my brains and sharing whatever I know. I hope I'm not that stupid, right? So because the future of Afghan people will probably compromised. But then you sense the humility. You sense you also sense, and this is not only true with President Ghani, it's true with some great leaders out there. Well, history will just judge them whether they're great or not. But what's important is that given that period of time, you're able to recognize that I don't know anything. And I may probably need to reach out to people who are probably younger than me, or weaker than me, or poorer than me, because everyone has something to contribute. So that's, I think, a realization that we have to reach out to each other beyond borders. For example, in the Philippines, the media is under attack. If you speak out, then you could probably risk your life, right? Who can help? If you're a whistleblower of a very big corruption issue involving a tyrant, if you speak out right there in the middle of that society, overnight you could disappear. We have seen that in the Marcos dictatorship. But having a sanctuary, a collaboration with network of, for example, media people around the world, banding together, human rights workers, those who cannot speak, those who could provide a voice beyond the borders, it's critically important. Otherwise, impunity will happen and continue to spread. So that's the collaboration, the necessity of collaboration. Those who can speak must speak. Those who are in the safety of their, the comfort of their sanctuary must provide a message out there for those who are being oppressed and who are in danger of continuing to be oppressed. So you must speak. Fear must not overwhelm us. Mm-hmm. So those who can must speak.
No. Well, thank you very much. It's really inspiring. And then, yeah, I just want to echo, what Arnel said. And then I think my work as a human rights activist really is to, try to keep up hope. As Arnel said, when human rights is violated, you really, you're easily despaired. And then that happens in Japan. That happens in Japan for their, marginalized or discriminated communities. But also, my work also relates to the human rights around the world. And then it's not a surprising news that in Asia there are a lot of regions and countries where rights are easily violated, as Arnel just said about the situation of the Philippines, where tens of thousands of people are killed without any due process. And then, but that's not really a unique situation, So my role really is, when I was in Japan, when I was a domestic lawyer, my job was really pushing the Japanese government to do better things, right things, and then, but I was doing it without fear. I never had the fear to sacrifice my career or get punished for saying what I wanted to say. But I realized when I started Human Rights Watch, it is my privilege to be in Japan, And then now I have a lot of friends and colleagues within Human Rights Watch, but also outside of Human Rights Watch. They are really courageous, talking about freedom of expression or about the discrimination in their country, and then they face I was talking with a friend of mine from China today, and then our mutual friend, who is a human rights lawyer, was jailed for defending their privileged in China. So that's the reality for human rights activists or the civil society activists in around the world. So I think I really realized in the past 10 years that this is my privilege, that I can speak freely, and then I have to use my privilege, as well as I have to push the Japanese government to use its power not only to defend the rights of Japanese citizens, but also and stand up for the people in the region. And then I believe that the role of the Japanese government is, of course, having good relations with the counterparts governments, but also it is their responsibility, and it's for the Japanese government's interest to have good relations with the people in those countries, and then to keep this region as a right, to make this region into a human rights and then the rule of law respecting region, which in these days is a very mixed picture. We cannot be too optimistic.
Back to your question, Ambassador Kenny. Yeah, of course. We can definitely, you don't need boundaries anymore. I think we live in an age where I think decentralized is like the buzzword. Everyone's like blockchain or cryptocurrencies. I think the world and the technologies that we have, like the hubris of Silicon Valley is that you can build whatever technology and you can get immediate worldwide massive scale. And that's kind of the power of of being able to build something. So you build Twitter, and Twitter is now everywhere, hundreds of millions of users. I think that actually is what, that type of excitement is actually what drew me out of the State Department. I think I was serving in China. Actually, there's a couple people in the audience that I served while I was in China. So I had to, to Danny especially. But I think while I was there, I was there during the Google China years when Google China was being ousted. And what was crazy to me was the Chinese government would come to the U.S. government and say, "Why are you telling Google to do this?" And we were like, we didn't tell Google to do anything. They were making their independent decisions. And then the young political officer, I was like, wait a second, they think Google is actually doing more power, like that's a bigger policy lever. So I went and I joined Twitter because I thought, you don't have to respect the boundaries anymore. If you want to push forward free expression, you can now do that through technology, and I can go and work for a company, an American company that's worldwide, and push that technology. So that type of idealism is what I think the younger generation can latch onto. However, I think that there is a huge danger to that. So the internet was supposed to be here, and the internet was supposed to connect us all. We're supposed to live and be able to talk to whoever we want in China or in Australia. We're able to connect. But actually, what we've seen with the internet and kind of these social media communications technologies is that it's led to fragmentation and polarization. We are now in filter bubbles. We have separated as tribes of how the type of information that we read and we receive. So I actually think that technologies have to be mediated in an interesting way. And I think a lot of what we need to come together as society, again, to talk about is how do you put the human back into technology? And I think that's the big question that I think the young generation of technologists, the people who want to change the world, need to understand to do that from a very local level. How do you bring it back down to our community here? You could have dialed into this particular panel, probably online, but I think there's something special about people congregating. It means a lot that, Ambassador Kenny, that you're here, that Prime Minister Rudd is here. I think that type of... Here. I don't know about that, but I think that type of human-to-human connection is very important. So you know, we talk about AI, machine learning, and like how does the future of data actually propel forward technologies? And I think we have to design that in a way that puts the human in the center. And I think the Japanese society actually has tremendous experience doing that for hardware, you know, with robotics technologies. But how do you actually start to build that through software that can scale in this massive way? And I think that nuanced kind of division and that balance is, I think, what actually drives my interest in how do we connect as a society, how do we connect as humanity.
I have lots more questions, but do you have questions for each other? Okay, well, I'll ask another question. Think of a question for one of the other panelists, okay? Well, no, I think you've touched on, obviously, some of the most, you know, fundamental issues that are going to be challenging us globally and locally over the next you know, generation. So I'm glad that you're here to think about them, because I'm not sure that our generation has really, you know, left you with a great situation here right now. But I have great faith in all of you. And I know that at home in the US, we struggle with sort of finding these career pathways into public service and how to marry sort of doing good and doing well. And certainly there's a lot of pressure for people to pursue careers that are predictable. But between the disruptions caused by technology, urbanization, all the different, you know, migration, you each have found a way forward. And you're thankfully giving back and bringing people along with you and working to connect and create communities across space. But how do you really think about sort of the changing, what it means to be a leader in the public space in the future? Is it the individual voice, the courageous person? Is it compromising? How do you sort of think about what the people coming behind you will need?
Do you have an answer to that?
No, I'm asking you. I don't know. What do you need? I'll think about what, I mean, for me, I think that it is important to have role models like all of you, because I think people are confused, and we can see that even in the fact that in the U.S., only 20% of young people vote. So that means they either feel like things are okay the way they are, or they don't really know how to make them any better, and they don't think that their voice matters. So then I think you end up with a society that isn't reflecting the younger generation. They're digital natives. They have the capacity to shape the future, but they're not participating in the political process. They do community service, but they don't want to get involved in politics. You can't really solve these problems on scale if if the political system is not involved. So how do you create, I guess, people to see government and politics as a way of solving problems, not just raising issues and sort of having rhetoric? I don't know, it might be different in Asia, but that's sort of one of the challenges that we're facing in the U.S.
I think what's important is we must encourage the young people to join government. I said government because I think if you really want to create a great impact on society, government is the way.
You feel guilty now?
The way to do it.
I'll go back. I'll come back.
It's very challenging. It's a thankless job because even if you have done the best and the most excellent job in human history, people will just simply say, that's your job, right? So you're a public servant. That's your job. You don't expect to praise you, right? But when you commit one minor mistake, they make a lot of noise about it. My experience is serving in the government, I was able to see the entire city that I built, and designed. And I see real people living in it and businesses thriving in it. When I built a tollway from a farmland that used to be inaccessible, and you see millions of people now traveling, and then real property values coming up and economic activities expediting, then you see the impact. But then again, you're faced with, you have to deal with corrupt politicians. Then you have to refuse bribery that comes into hundreds of millions of dollars. So, and then if you refuse, you earn a lot of enemies. Then you have to deal with government bureaucracy. But then I realized also in government, there are much more good public servants than bad public servants. I would hasten to say that probably in any government, there's probably 85 to 15%, 85% good public servants, but a lot of them are afraid. Except that, and those, the corrupt ones probably are the ones who are lobbying for their positions, and then they use that and silence any critic because they have the influence. But if you really want to change the world, government, particularly, but I would say, I guess, giant corporations now whose market capitalization could be even bigger than nation states. They have a lot of influence also in the world. Climate change, for example. So we must bring, the way I see it, we must bring moral courage in the decision making. And a lot of young people has that. They are not yet as tainted, as jaded as the, I would say, those older generations that have given up. Of course, you have not given up. There are a lot of older generations that have not given up as well. But there are a lot of older generations that I'm looking for mentorship who would tell me, don't rock the boat. You're putting yourself at risk. Because they don't want to share the same trouble that you're going to put yourself into, right? So they have a comfortable life. Now, if they get involved with you, then you are also putting their families, and they wouldn't want to wait to I think risk the time and the resources and even the fame and prestige that they have. So they'll lose a lot of political. So I think government, young people must serve in government. Young people must be mentored by older generation to keep up the faith and stand up for what is right. And that's moral courage. Second is compassion. We must be able to care beyond our own personal interest. Government basically is built for that. Corporations, particularly in the board, and I would have to say this, I have served in different boards. It pays a lot to have women in boards because the diversity in decision making, the diversity, because men tend to have a group think. I'm sorry to say this, but you know that, right? So when you're in board, you, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I've seen the difference of women in boardrooms, and those are all men in the board. There's more transparent decision making. There's diversity in thinking, the kind of contribution that they bring. You may not necessarily agree with what they have to say, but it enhances the discussion. So if you put that kind of in your decision making, mindful that we are stewards, whether in your government or whether in your giant corporation, you're a steward of the values that the shareholders are giving you. You're also a steward of the environment that the nature has given you to create wealth. So I think those two, moral courage, compassion, are actually very important, I think. And for young people to join government and assume leadership, they have to, because the impact could be significant.
Thank you. That was great, and I think you're right on target. I think we do need to make government attractive again for people to feel like they can have an impact, because the impact they can have is much larger than they're often aware of. So I think a lot of people want to do it for part of their career. Some people want to devote their whole lives to it, but I think it's important to give people a chance to serve in some way during their lifetime. And once they do, I think they find it very rewarding. So you've all managed to kind of do public service, both from within government without outside of government, which is also a constructive way of making government change, because we need some pressure from groups like Human Rights Watch. Yeah, go ahead.
From my experience in Japan, I think the Japanese government has been successful in recruiting young, talents into their government. At least these days, maybe the attraction is getting lower these days, but particularly like a few decades ago, many of those graduated from the University of Tokyo really wanted to join the government. So I think it is. I think the Japanese government has been successful in that sense. However, but I think from my eyes, the government of Japan can do a better job in recruiting more talent to do a kind of part-time, public service career. The Japan system is like a career system. So when you are young and join those government, and then you need to, you have to start from the beginning, and then you are not really, it's not really easy to join from the middle. But I think that there are a lot of Asia 21 alumni, as well as, these days, successful private sector people joining government for the part of their life, and then retire, or not only the government, but into the public sector. So there are some role models these days, including, I think, James also has been serving some public role, and then, he goes back and forth. So if this becomes more regular things, I think Japan will be more successful in getting more talents into the public service jobs.
I don't mean to be a naysayer, but I disagree with kind of both positions, because I think the free market speak. So the fact that you don't have enough young people joining government isn't the problem of the government. I think there might be some sort of, you can put inspiration, you might have kind of people that say, oh, you should join government. In my case was very similar. I had a professor who kind of encouraged me to join, but that doesn't happen for most people, and that model does not scale. So if you actually want, it's like you have to go from crawling and then walking and then running. So if you say, if you want to join the government, and being a public servant is like kind of the running part, what are the crawling kind of first steps? What's the walking first steps? Before you go and say, I'm gonna quit my private sector job and go into the government, or I think, and that crawling step for me is just participation. So right now in America, there's a young generation of people who are now active. They're activated because they might have different politics from the current administration. And they would rather just go march. And the marches don't have that much effect to be, maybe there's a cultural effect that happens, but in terms of policy change, I think there's a lot of studies that show that it doesn't have immediate effect. And I think what's unique about that is how many people participate in politics now. Like, we are all, like most people in this audience are from a liberal democracy. And when was the last time you went to City Hall and said, hey, my opinion of something is this, or on local issues, forget about national issues. And I think it'd be mostly crickets actually in the audience, because I'm too busy. I don't have time to go to City Hall. So I think as technologists and people thinking about engagement, how do you lower the barrier of civic participation? So how do you lower the barrier of crawling so that more people can crawl? And then maybe it's, you can create a certain type of technology that actually allows voices to be lifted up, and kind of use new types of pattern analysis, machine learning to do that. But I think if you have to work on the entire pipeline, and I think just encouraging people to join the government is not that helpful. And I think actually increasing the pipeline to say, hey, let's all participate in something. Let's do the very baby steps of being citizens of a democracy, I think is how I would kind of push back, not to be too controversial.
Yeah. Right, so I'm actually going to build on your point, Eugene. So I think I agree with the idea of identifying what the baby steps are, crawling and then walking. And I also want to add to that by saying that context specificity is also could be really helpful. So in Singapore's context, we love like technocratic mumbo jumbo. We talk about analysis and systems maps, and like and people in government like that in my context, right? So what I've done, I've like two very quick stories. One is from my youth activist days when I decided to start a nonprofit with some friends for enabling young people to participate more effectively in social change projects. I got a tap on the shoulder, and I was told that I should be careful what I say in public because I was being watched. And this person was kind of advising me from a perspective of care because I want you to be out here doing your thing and not locked up and not being able to do your thing. And I froze for a while. And then, but after I recollected, I reframed this work as building skills for young people to be more effective in, strategic community work. And so you can't fault skills, right? But the other is now in my second social venture, which is in all the systems mapping stuff. It's partly my own nerdy thing, but it's also partly speaking to the kind of language that the civil servants and politicians in my country can relate to, which is, okay, yes, I can understand when you say analysis and when you show me some data. And what we've done with that is that we've combined this sort of like systems mapping using system dynamic stuff. I won't bore you with the physics of it, but combining that with participation in the frame of innovation, right? So there's a big drive in Singapore to push for innovation, both in terms of tech, but also social innovation. And so we created this approach for local neighborhoods, human services organizations who are the ones that administer financial services programs to not only get a better handle of the issues that they were facing in those communities, in the families that they served, but also in their ability to engage community residents in participatory ways that they're not used to, right? So this is different for my context. And by framing it in a way of innovation, it made it a lot less politically scary for civil servants to then engage in this as well. So then what happened was we had a lot of younger civil servants some of whom were facing different levels of happiness and frustration as a spectrum, to like find outlets and find different ways of engaging in other things that were happening in Singapore that their bosses may not otherwise have sort of created this space very nicely for them here. Let me put this on your lap and then you come and do this thing. So it's probably, understanding your context and finding frames and a language that fits to that, and then you put whatever you want in that.
We only have a couple minutes left. I don't know if anyone has a quick question for someone else, but I also want to just before that say how inspired I am by listening to all of you and how hopeful I am and how proud the Asia Society should be of this program. And there will be many others participating and sharing the kind of work that you do. So do we want to give anybody here, does anybody here want the last word? Or?
I have a question.
Oh, okay, very good. Finally, a question.
I think a question for you and for everyone, I think. In my experience, I've been to government, I've been to private sector. I've run billions of dollars of corporations. But I've seen so much inequality in society. And looking at the impact of that inequality in democracy. Sometimes I think about how could capitalism could actually promote dictatorship and tyranny. Because big businesses, in their rent-seeking ways, they'd rather compromise with the dictator to control the market than promote a free market behavior. They'd rather not be transparent, they'd rather bribe the dictator and get a business, right? So sometimes I get to think, is democracy really compatible with capitalism or is it a dictatorship? Because, and it's telling in a survey that we had in the Philippines. There's so much killings, 24,000 people have been killed as of today, and every night it's increasing. And most of those who are killed are people in the slums. I have yet to hear a drug lord being killed or being arrested. All of them were killed in the slums. And in the survey, on the trust rating on who agrees, it's the A and B that has supported so much of it. That means the richest of Filipinos are in agreement with it. But usually in an election, they blame the poor people for electing a bad leader. The truth is, poor people are actually making elections as an economic decision. Because to them, all politicians are all the same. They'll just get their economic benefit on the election time because after that, they wouldn't care, right? So, but in the longer term, because as the economy grows, even the global economy grows, and inequality grows, is it about time that we really rethink what capitalism is all about and how it impacts our democratic way of life and how economic forces could actually influence elections, could elect a president, could depose a president as well. So, and that kind of impact would create a lot of change, whether good or bad, for billions of people. So is it correct? What is the proper way of bridging that inequality such that resources and eventually political power, which my friend Eugene mentioned here, participation, but when people can't, having difficulty participating when their first agenda is to find food, right? So probably that's a question I have to.
Well, I think it's always good to end on a question, and that is the question of our age right now, and it's a global question. So luckily, Josette is going to be here with the next panel, and perhaps she can search for some answers to that. But I think in the meantime, I thank you for asking it, and I think it's up to all of us to try to answer it in our own ways and in ways that benefit our fellow citizens. So thank you all and good luck with your work. And I think that they are all going to be around for a while, so this conversation can continue. So thank you again for